And we have to understand that Russia has won this war. We have to be very careful about what we demand at all. In fact, I would argue we shouldn't demand a damn thing. What we should urge is let's come up with a new security architecture. Let's bury this thing finally and irrevocably and move forward. And I think that's what President Trump wants to do. I just hope that the people working for him get it. Well, I greeted that with a tremendous sigh of relief and also a certain amount of admiration for President Trump, because President Trump, when shown the truth, recognized it finally. And I don't know why it took as long as it did, but I'm glad that it reached him. He's now telling everyone what you, I, and a lot of other people have been saying for 3 years. And this is the first dramatic step in the direction of normalizing relations with Russia, for which he deserves enormous applause and gratitude from us. Well, I don't think it's very difficult to play Biden like a fiddle, let's be frank. I think a lot of people fiddled with Biden for 4 years. And the people most mightily responsible for the big lies and the terrible, terrible things we've done to the people of Ukraine, as well as to the Russians. I mean, we're mightily responsible for over 1 million Ukrainian deaths and almost 100,000 Russian deaths. And it's a good thing. It's also a courageous thing that he stood up and said it, but Zelensky is a criminal.
The world is at a breaking point. The stakes? Nothing less than the future of global security. Douglas Macgregor just laid out a vision so shocking, so controversial, that it could rewrite history itself. Trump and Putin jointly receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, a total realignment of power, the erasure of everything the West has claimed about Russia. If true, this isn't just a shift, it's an earthquake. Douglas Macgregor paints a stark picture. Trust between the U.S. and Russia is beyond repair, and the war in Ukraine is already a sealed fate. He suggests that Trump alone has the power, and perhaps the willingness, to reset relations with Moscow, even at the cost of accepting Russia's total victory. The consequences of this would be massive, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire global order. Is this the future we're heading toward? And if so, who really wins? As we shift our focus from the controversial analysis of Douglas Macgregor, the geopolitical landscape in Ukraine takes an even more dramatic turn. The war itself is no longer just fought with bullets and missiles. It is now playing out in secret backrooms, intelligence briefings, and high-stakes political maneuvering. The latest reports indicate that Ukraine is not just battling Russian forces on the front lines, but also facing an internal power struggle that could reshape the nation's leadership. Washington, London, and Paris, once seen as unified in their support for Kyiv, are now scrambling to install their preferred candidates, setting the stage for an unprecedented clash of interests. At the same time, Russian forces continue to advance, making strategic breakthroughs that threaten to collapse key Ukrainian defensive positions. Let's break it all down. In a development that could redefine the war's trajectory, reports suggest that key allies of U.S. President Donald Trump have engaged in secret discussions with Zelensky's political opponents. This revelation indicates that Washington, or at least a faction within it, is actively seeking to replace the Ukrainian president. The two leading candidates emerging from these discussions are former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko and former President Petro Poroshenko, both seasoned political figures with substantial influence. According to these reports, the U.S. believes that Zelensky would lose an election if one were held, as Ukrainian citizens grow increasingly disillusioned with the prolonged war, ongoing corruption, and unfulfilled promises. However, holding an election under martial law is currently impossible, meaning the only way to remove Zelensky would be through political maneuvering or an external push. But the U.S. is not the only power looking to influence Ukraine's future leadership. The Europeans have their own candidate in mind. The United Kingdom appears to be backing Valery Zaluzhny, the former commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces and current ambassador to the UK. Zaluzhny has been outspoken in his criticism of U.S. actions, accusing Washington of destabilizing the global order, a stance that aligns with London's increasing frustration over American decision-making in the war. Meanwhile, France is standing firmly behind Zelensky. Macron's government seems determined to keep him in power, likely because Paris holds significant influence over Kyiv's decision-making. This European division plays directly into Russia's hands. If Washington, London, and Paris begin competing over Ukraine's leadership, it could weaken the West's coordination and leave Ukraine vulnerable to Russian advances. The possibility of a Western power struggle in Ukraine is exactly what the Kremlin has been waiting for. The Russians have long sought to divide and weaken their adversaries, and this new political rift could give them a golden opportunity. If the US, UK, and France end up at odds over who should lead Ukraine, their intelligence agencies and diplomatic forces may find themselves working against each other instead of against Moscow. This is not just a battle for Ukraine, it's a fight for dominance within the Western alliance itself. While the West is playing political chess, the situation on the ground is turning against Ukraine. One of the most shocking reports in recent days is that the United States has allegedly stopped sharing real-time intelligence with Ukraine. If true, this is a devastating blow. The Ukrainian military has relied heavily on American intelligence to target Russian positions, coordinate defenses, and use high-precision weaponry such as HIMARS missiles. Some sources suggest that Ukraine is still receiving intelligence from NATO, but even if that's the case, a reduction in American support could significantly hinder Kiev's ability to defend itself. Is this decision linked to the ongoing political maneuvers? Is Washington pulling back support in anticipation of a leadership change? These are the critical questions now being asked. Despite this, the Russians are continuing their offensive operations with brutal efficiency. In the Sumy region, they have reportedly cut off key supply routes and are systematically destroying Ukrainian logistics. Footage has emerged showing entire convoys of Ukrainian vehicles annihilated on the roads connecting Sumy to the rest of the country. The message is clear. Ukraine cannot safely resupply its forces in this sector without suffering massive losses. The most alarming development of all, however, is happening in the Kupiansk region, where Russian forces have reportedly crossed the Oskil River. If this is confirmed, it would mark a strategic breakthrough that could force Ukraine into a full-scale retreat from the area. The Oskil River has long served as a natural defensive line, and Ukrainian forces have fought hard to prevent Russian troops from breaching it. Several pro-Russian sources claim that Moscow's troops have established a foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river, taking control of multiple buildings and streets in the town of Sinkivka. If these reports are accurate, then Ukraine's entire defensive strategy in the region could collapse, forcing its forces to either fall back or risk encirclement. At the same time, Russian FPV drone strikes are inflicting massive casualties on Ukrainian troops. The Suja sector has become a meat grinder, with relentless aerial attacks devastating Ukrainian positions. Reports from Ukrainian military sources describe the situation as critical, with some suggesting that a retreat is the only option left to avoid complete annihilation. Meanwhile, Russian artillery and airstrikes continue to hammer Ukrainian supply lines, targeting critical roads, bridges, and command centers. If Ukraine cannot find a way to stabilize the front, the entire eastern theater could collapse, allowing Russia to push deeper into Kupiansk, Sumy, and beyond. Ukraine is now fighting a two-front war, one on the battlefield and one in the political arena. While soldiers struggle to hold back Russian advances, Western leaders are engaged in a power struggle over who will control Kyiv. The implications of this are staggering. If Zelensky is replaced, Ukraine's entire war strategy could change overnight. If the West fractures over Ukraine's leadership, military aid and coordination could weaken. If Russia exploits these divisions, they could gain a decisive advantage on the battlefield. For now, Zelensky remains in power, but his grip is weakening. As U.S. factions work behind the scenes to install a new leader, Ukraine's future is being shaped by forces beyond its control. At the same time, the Russian war machine keeps grinding forward, and with each passing day, Ukraine's situation becomes more precarious. The question now is simple. Can Ukraine survive this moment of internal and external crisis, or is this the beginning of the end? The situation in Ukraine is shifting rapidly, and the stakes have never been higher. From the intense political maneuvering to the brutal realities on the battlefield, every development carries massive consequences for Ukraine, Russia, and the entire geopolitical landscape. Who will take power in Kyiv? How will the ongoing Russian advances shape the course of the war? And what role will the West ultimately play in determining Ukraine's future? If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any critical updates. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Zelensky will be replaced? Can Ukraine hold the line against the Russian onslaught? Let's discuss. Stay tuned, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next update.